thank you again, and good afternoon. Thank you again for being here. I really, really appreciate your support, and I do spend a lot of time working on this, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity for sharing what I've learned with you. Thank you. So this is, as you're aware, is a series of 4. This is the last one of 4 presentations we've done this semester. And the title, I had set the title like right from the beginning, like, you know, so we did what's in the food, what's in the water, what's in the air, and I said, okay, let's do the last one, what's up with the planet. And I've done the state of the planet last semester, and I don't want to do the same thing. So I had no idea what I was going to do really up until like a week ago, you know. So how am I going to go about this in a different way rather than going through, oh, like we're losing the forest, we're losing the water, you know. So how could I do it differently? So what I've decided to do is to go with the birds and the bees and and say, hey, see what they have to tell us. So what I've learned, I thought I knew a lot, and I thought I couldn't be more depressed. Well, I was wrong. I spent this whole weekend on this. I thought, oh my God. And in some ways, it's really interesting because I didn't think I could be more depressed, but I was. On the other hand, also, I was also really in awe of nature. You know, it was so amazing and so inspiring, you know. So both heights in both directions. We'll go to the bees first, and I totally fell in love with bees this weekend. So please forgive me for all the bee pictures. Because I couldn't decide which one. So all of you have heard about the disappearance of bees, right? The colony collapse disorder. What's really unusual about it is there are actually no dead bodies around. So somehow the colonies are collapsing, but they don't see dead bodies around. That's one of the really sort of curious aspects of the CCD, colony collapse disorder. And it is actually all over our country and all over the world. It's a global problem, so it's not just a local California problem or just a US problem, but a global problem. And so why should we care about that? We should care about that because bees are keystone species. And if you look at this picture, so it comes from this fact that this is a keystone for the arch. If you take that one stone out, the whole thing would collapse. Right. So we started naming species in ecosystems that they play a really important role. They might have very small biomass, in other words, very small number, but they play a very, very important role within the structure of the community. And when they go, the community collapses. So one example is the beaver. So they eat the sea urchins. And when the beavers are gone, then we have an overpopulation of sea urchins, and they eat up all the kelp. And then all the species that depend on the kelp then have no food. So that's an example of an ecosystem collapse when a keystone species number is drastically reduced. And really another interesting story was like back in the 1600s when the first immigrants, when they tried to bring apples to the US, they were not successful until they also imported the honeybees. So honeybees are not native to North America at all. And another immediate reason why we should care is that, you know, as USDA says, 1 bite out of every 3 bites you eat comes from food pollinated by bees. So, but if you look at this picture, if you look sort of closely, so it's not just the fruits and vegetables, that's like obvious, right? But if this cow was not fed corn, now corn doesn't need to be pollinated, but if the cow was not fed corn, if the cow ate alfalfa, then there would be no cow if there's no pollination. And another interesting thing is about the potatoes. Now potatoes you can just like save your potato, right? In the winter and you stick it in the ground, it will grow, right? But they also can be pollinated and they produce a seed. In fact, this potatoes grown from seed would have greater biodiversity. You know, if you just have a potato regrow, it's like cloning a potato, so that biodiversity is lower. And we all know that biodiversity is really important. I look what happened to Ireland, right? When one species of potato was troubled, the entire population was troubled. So even though we could have potatoes without pollination, potatoes with pollination would represent much more security for us in terms of food. So, and actually, again, the USDS says about 100 crops, like the crops that we eat, depend on bee pollination. So they include a lot of, so grapes. So that means you can't have wine either. So it's not just directly eating grapes. And blueberries, just like, just about everything, at least I eat. And then nuts also, and almonds. So the CCD, colony collapse disorder, started in 2006. And this report was made in 2007 to the Congress by this really famous entomologist, and you have her credit up there. And when she made that report at the time, it was before CCD actually happened. When the committee finished their work and did their conclusions, was actually before CCD. And at that time, they predicted if the decline they had seen continued from 1989 to 1996, that managed industrial beekeeping would be extinct by 2035. That was before CCD. And what's really interesting, like this is, she gave this talk just very recently, and she called them six-legged livestock because they actually manufacture commodities, honey. They also provide a service, and you can say that that service is far more important than the commodity they produce. And you can see that, and she reported at this 2010 video. You can see this in YouTube. You can find it's actually very, very interesting video on bees. She reported that there was 40% decline up to 2005. Again, that's before CCD. And the thing, some people say, like my daughter, I had a conversation with her yesterday. She said, I thought things were better. Well, they're not. They actually continue to occur, and again, this is inspector from the Department of Agriculture in Florida. Again, what he heard is that all the bees have gone to pollinate almonds in California in 2010. 30% of them died in a very, very short time. So almonds. Almonds is actually really big industry. It's actually over $2 billion industry for California. In fact, it's the most valuable agricultural export from the US. We make lots and lots of money with honey, with almonds. We produce 80% of the world's almonds, and we export to nearly 90 countries. We have over 600,000 acres planted with almonds and over 60,000 growers. So huge, huge business. How do we maintain this huge business? We maintain huge business by making sure demand continues to stay up. This is actually a rural funds management. It's an organization. I've learned so much for this research. It's so amazing, these organizations. They're out there to help people. How do you continue to generate revenue? That's their one goal. How do we keep making more and more money? So obviously, you have to keep the supply up, and how do we keep the demand up, and how do we do that? One way to keep the demand up is to make sure, hey, almond is the wonder food, get everybody to want it. This is actually the California Almond Board, and they have a huge website, and they're so proud of all the research that they sponsor financially. And right now, they have listed all these papers that have been published in the past that they have sponsored. And right now, this instant, they are financially supporting 7 different projects to show how wonderful almond is, and actually so good for you that you can cure cancer, you can prevent cancer, heart disease, and keep your weight down. Wow, so amazing. Let's go get some more almonds. Now, this is a sort of a lonely almond tree. Now, in order to make money, in order to have a $2 billion industry, in order to supply the world with almonds with huge demand, can we do it this way? Obviously not. And we in America do everything big. So most of Central Valley is everybody knows California Central Valley, right? It's actually a desert, yeah? So it's a desert. It's a desert for the most part of the year. We call it some parts Mediterranean because in 2 or 3 months a year, maybe you would not have desert conditions, maybe. So for the majority of the time, it's desert conditions, and we're growing almonds there. That's made possible by importing water from all over the place, right? That's a whole different topic altogether. So here you looking actually rows and rows, acres and acres, hundreds of acres, thousands of acres of almonds. So now, what comes to your mind immediately?
How much water they must use?
How much water they must use also. What else? Pesticides. Very good. What else?
How many bees are needed?
Oh, good job. How many bees do we need? I mean, so without the bees,
Yeah.
so here you have the answer to everything. And if you look at so obviously you just can't rely on the environment. Obviously you have to bring bees from all over the place, right? You have to have high concentrated almond trees. You have to have high concentration of bees. So where do they come from? They come from all over the country. They come from everywhere on these flatbacks. And almond season happens in February, and the pollination has to be done within like 20 days or so. So they have to like work themselves to death, basically. And they bring them from all over the place. Now, you can't really see that well. Now, if like they have to do this work in a really short period, how do you get this to work with the bee cycle? So the bee cycle, when they lay a bunch of eggs and have more bees, depends on what?
Queen bee has to lay them.
The queen bee has to lay them. Why would they decide to lay a lot of bees? What drives that?
Lots of pollen.
Good job, lots of pollen. In other words, it has to be seasonal. They need food, right? So how do we make sure they all come out in February? February is usually not a lot of food out there, and they come from all over the place, right? You truck them in, and also you have to truck them in. See, we have to look at the bee cycle. In order to trick them to making a lot of eggs to be ready to work in February, what we do is we put them, since we don't have near the almond groves, we don't have a lot of wild habitat, right? You can't park the bees here. They have no food. So what you do is you put them in potato cellars in Idaho, for months, and then you feed them tons of corn syrup to make them think there's actually lots of honey out there. Let's lay lots of eggs to go and get more. So I thought that was really funny. Beehive brand corn syrup. You would think they designed a label for the bees to make sure they will eat it. Maybe they're convincing the humans to make them feel like this is really good to be your bees. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. So the bees in the boxes, when we domesticate bees, we put them through a lot of stresses. So one of the big stresses in the box is very poorly insulated. So they have to keep their temperature at a certain degrees, and they huddle together and to keep that temperature. So it's a huge challenge for them to do it inside a box instead of inside a cavity of a tree, where it's warmer, it's more shield. So put them in the cellar helps them to be able to survive through the winter. Normally, when it's very cold, there will be massive die-off of the bees. The population varies with season, and we want to control that. We want to trick them. We want to make sure they don't die. So to understand more about this, I look into a little bit more about the bee cycles. So there's different kinds of bees, worker bees and queen bees and drone bees. So they're the male bees. And the only one we really care about is really the worker bees. We want lots of worker bees. So here's actually the developmental stages of a worker bee. So they're inside these cells, and it's slowly making its way out. And here it shows you how queen bee lays an egg inside these cells, and then it turns into a larvae, and then the bees then, the worker bee, so when a worker bee comes out, the worker bee has a lot of work to do. It doesn't just go straight out to the flowers to pollinate. It has work to do inside the beehives. It has to do that for 21 days before they start going out. So one of the things they have